Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos.
The main character, after dying inside of his previous life, he wakes up as a genius dragon inside of Harry Potter. What is this dragon gonna do inside of Harry Potter?
Who let this evil dragon into Hogwarts? Chapter 1. Can Humanity Reconcile? 1991 years. Home Forest, England. Beneath the oak tree, dappled sunlight streamed down as several auras trudged deeper into the dense forest, their footsteps crunching on the fallen leaves. Charlie Weasley and Audrey, also a researcher at the Dragon Sanctuary, followed closely behind. Looking at the aura's nonchalant attitude, he couldn't help but speak up and remind them. Be careful, fire dragons have extremely keen senses. Any creature that enters their territory will be detected immediately. Relax, dragon expert. The leading aura waved his hand fearlessly. It's just a little kid who hasn't even grown all its teeth yet. I'd love for it to come knocking on my door. As he spoke, Dilix smiled confidently, his 8 exceptionally white teeth gleaming in the sunlight. Charlie's attention wasn't on the teeth. His gaze was fixed on the back of Delilah's head, where a shadow seemed to flash by among the bushes. That is Fire Dragon. A fire dragon has appeared. Charlie suddenly drew his wand, and several fire-resistant spells landed on everyone almost simultaneously. Audrey, who was standing nearby, also reacted quickly, and countless chains rushed towards the shadows with a whooshing sound, although most of them were stopped by the dense branches of the trees. In contrast, the aura's performance was somewhat disappointing. I'm collapsing. I'm collapsing. Damn it, I can't see it. Captain Delilah, in your left hand. No, your right hand. Damn it, it's flown into the sky again. Is this guy a fire dragon, or Pudmere United Seeker? Don't use the stunning charm. Prioritize restricting its movement, Charlie roared, squinting as he observed the mysterious, agile, dancer-like emerald green figure in the sky. A common Welsh green dragon. No, the Welsh green dragon has a pitifully small wingspan, and it doesn't have a long crest that extends all the way to its back. A hybrid of the Norwegian Spinosaurus. But judging from their appearance, they don't seem to have much in common. As a fire dragon researcher, although Charlie mainly studies Romanian horned dragons, he also has some knowledge of other fire dragons. In his view, the common Welsh green dragon looked like a stunted little lizard, while the Norwegian spinal dragon was a hunched old man. But the young dragon in the sky was so elegant, it was just like a high-ranking nobleman. Could it be a new species that has never been discovered before? Charlie was astonished by his own bold guess, yet his heart inevitably burned with excitement. No researcher can resist the temptation to name a new species. But the prerequisite is that he can catch that baby dragon. Get out of the way. Delis suddenly roared, and Charlie, who was closest to him, instinctively lunged forward. A fierce hurricane swept across his cheeks like a blade, making them sting. Then Charlie realized that it was the airflow created by the fire dragon's rapid dive. Ah! Several screams came from behind. The auras, unable to dodge in time, were hit squarely. They only saw a green shadow flash past their eyes before they completely lost consciousness. Entwined by vines. Audrey reacted the fastest, with countless vines surging towards the newly landed dragon. Although most of them were torn to shreds by the sharp dragon claws, a few managed to entangle the dragon's hind legs. I can't hold on much longer. The girl was drenched in sweat, and a hand gripping the magic wand was trembling slightly. Delirious understood her meaning and led the remaining auras to surround the struggling young dragon, continuously casting stun and imprisonment spells. Charlie remained where he was. For some reason, he felt that something was wrong. What is it? It's an eye. Charlie was suddenly jolted awake. Although the young dragon acted like a dying beast, there was no fear in its eyes, only a deep sense of mockery. Wait, this is a trap. Charlie was very observant. But the baby dragons move even faster. The hurricane swept through again, scattering withered branches and leaves everywhere. Charlie had to squint and could only vaguely see Dexter leading the auras in pursuit of the flapping-winged young dragon. A withered twig grazed Audrey's face, leaving a bright red bloodstain and interrupting her already precarious magical output. Roll! The young dragons rose with the wind, and the auras cast spells haphazardly, ignoring the ground beneath their feet, which, though seemingly solid, was actually covered with branches and leaves. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the ground collapsed, the aura disappeared, and Audrey fell into a coma due to the disruption of her magic. Charlie was the only one left standing in the entire stadium. Merlin's pants! Charlie's mouth twitched wildly. Before he could even react, his carefully assembled dragon-catching team had been almost completely wiped out. From diving down to feigning being trapped, and finally luring the enemy into an elaborately constructed trap. Charlie found it hard to believe that these strategies came from a fire dragon. Rustling. The wind howled, and the emerald green figure landed back on the ground, but unlike the first time, it was not so fierce. Instead, it appeared calm and unhurried, like a victorious king arriving at his loyal kingdom. Charlie's legs trembled slightly as he watched the baby dragon approach. Standing at nearly 16 feet tall, it wasn't considered large among fire dragons, but the sense of oppression it brought was incomparable. Although Charlie had foreseen his future fate after becoming a fire dragon researcher, the reserve was not without its unfortunate victims who were eaten by fire dragons. But he never imagined that this day would come so quickly and so unexpectedly. Forgive me, Mother. Charlie closed his eyes tremblingly, not daring to look at the sharp little daggers under the dragon's kiss, only hoping that everything would happen faster so that he could leave as peacefully as possible. The expected excruciating pain did not occur for a long time. Instead, a deep, hoarse, yet slightly immature voice suddenly rang in his ear. Human, state your name. Charlie stared, wide-eyed in horror. The fire dragon has spoken. Hey, should we just kill them? Looking at the man trembling like a leaf, too terrified to speak, Person shook his head and gave up on the tempting idea. Not to mention that in his previous life as a human, he believed he still retained a tiny bit of humanity. A force capable of training 7 mages was far beyond what he, still a young dragon, could afford to provoke. Although the training was rather poor. This place has already been exposed. Killing them now would be pointless and would only further enrage the mysterious force behind it all. As a naturally cunning green dragon, and with a human soul, Person was able to effectively suppress the arrogance and irritability inherent in his dragon nature, and weigh the pros and cons before making a decision. Dragons are nature's darlings. They don't need to make any effort to increase their strength over time. Therefore, for Poison, wealth, family, power, these are all illusions. Only by living can he become a true legend. For this reason, Perseus, abandoned by Daenerys Targaryen, hid in this remote forest for 11 years to avoid the dangerous human forces in the dragon legacy. Unfortunately, it was eventually discovered. Poison sighed softly. Regardless of how these humans discovered his existence, it indicates that this place is no longer safe, and he must find another place to hide. But before that, understanding the surrounding circumstances is equally important for Poison. 11 years after his transmigration, his understanding of the world remains based on fragments of memories from the dragon's legacy that do not belong to him. Poison knew nothing about the development of society or the forces around him. Human, tell me, where do you come from? Unable to get a reply for a long time, Person flicked his tail impatiently, urging the man in front of him to speak as soon as possible. Even as a pampered mage, this guy's mental fortitude is far too poor, as if he's never heard of dragons being able to talk before. But how is that possible? Under Poisson's increasingly hostile gaze, the man finally came to his senses and stammered as he introduced himself. I am Charlie Weasley, from the Romanian Dragon Sanctuary, and the others are auras from the Ministry of Magic. Please believe me, we mean you no harm. Charlie Weasley, Ministry of Magic, aura. These words sounded strangely familiar to Poisson, but he couldn't immediately tell whether this familiarity came from his past life or from the complex memories in the dragon's legacy. As for the man's claim of having no malicious intent, such a clumsy lie can't even fool those foolish white scales. As a cunning and intelligent green dragon, Person naturally wouldn't believe human nonsense. But the Fire Dragon Reserve. 11 years have passed, and the dragons have fallen to the point where they need protection. Person secretly rejoiced. If he hadn't been cautious enough to avoid any place where humans might appear for 11 years, he might have been captured and taken to the so-called Fire Dragon Reserve long ago. Young dragons, captured by humans, never have a good ending. As he was pondering this, a poor guy who had been knocked unconscious not far away suddenly woke up. Before Person could react, he saw him raise his wand. No! Poison flapped his dragon wings, and a fierce gale forced Charlie to lie prone on the ground, but he couldn't stop the orange-red fireworks from blooming in the sky. Asking for help. Realizing that this place was not safe to stay any longer, Person decisively abandoned the interrogation and flew away at top speed, leaving the others behind in the blink of an eye. But what is faster than him? Swire! Suddenly, an iron chain shot out from behind him, waving wildly like a long snake, and quickly grabbed at Possu. Person quickly adjusted his direction, attempting to avoid the chains locking him, but his massive dragon body became a hindrance. Faced with the faster and more agile chains, Person had no way to avoid them. Boom! With a loud bang, the emerald green figure crashed to the ground, its heavy body kicking up a cloud of dust. Poison struggled desperately, the chains clanging together with a crisp sound, but showed no sign of breaking. Immediately following, steady footsteps drew closer. A tall, thin old man with a silver beard reaching his waist emerged from the dust and walked unhurriedly to Poison, speaking gently. Don't be nervous, child. We'll take you to your new home soon. New home. Poison scoffed at this. But when faced with an opponent far stronger than themselves, only a bunch of reckless red dragons would think of provoking them. As a green dragon, Person wholeheartedly agreed with that widely circulated old saying. Those who understand the times are wise. Looks like we'll have to resort to that trick again. Under the old man's astonished gaze, Person mobilized all his magic power, and his enormous body began to twist and deform, eventually shrinking into a handsome boy with black hair and yellow eyes, about 11 or 12 years old. The boy spoke. Can humanity reconcile? Chapter 2, Hogwarts. Professor Dumbledore, are you joking? How could a dragon possibly transform into a human? There's absolutely no precedent for this. Connolly, a precedent is a precedent precisely because it has never happened before. Okay, let's assume it's all true. But what should we do with him? Should we send him to the Fire Dragon Protection Area as planned? No, we cannot treat a child like an animal, especially since the Fire Dragon Reserve does not have the capacity to discipline him. But we can't just let him go back into society like this. That kid has already gotten several auras into St. Mungo's hospital. If he causes any more trouble, I'll be the Minister for Magic for good. Relax, Connolly. Actually, I've already thought of a good place for him. Eh, Well, the sturdy iron chains firmly locked Poison to the chair. But what constrained him even more was this frail, powerless human body. Transfiguration, a skill that only adult dragons can master, was awakened by Person in his early childhood, partly due to his familiarity with humans and partly due to his innate talent. Aside from the silver dragons, which are closest to humans, ordinary dragons have always disdained to transform into human form. For the arrogant and conceited five-colored dragons, this is an unbearable insult. As for Poison, his idea was quite simple. Human beings have their limits. He would never want to expose himself to such a vulnerable state unless absolutely necessary. As for the current situation, it is clearly a necessary one. Person shifted uncomfortably, while the auras guarding him rested their hands on their wands at their waists, but made no move. The pleading tactic finally worked. The old man neither killed him nor took him to the so-called fire dragon protection area, but instead brought him to this empty, dark underground room. What you need to do next is very simple. Feign submission and outlive that old man to death. In the dragon legacy of Persephone, there are many stories like this. A valiant king subdues a cunning green dragon with his strength, rides it to conquer and roam freely, but his legacy always disappears after his death. Dragons have long lifespans, and the ruthless green dragons don't care about appearances. The enduring the old man's life tactic is the simplest and most ethical way to accumulate wealth. If the dragon can outlast all its enemies, it will be invincible. Crunch! The wooden door made a screeching sound as several footsteps entered the room. Leading the group was naturally the powerful old man, followed by Charlie, who had narrowly escaped, and a short, stout man who was constantly wiping sweat and looked extremely flustered. No, Professor Dumbledore, you can't do that. Our offices will be overflowing with letters from parents yelling at us. The short, stout man was trying to persuade him of something, but Person's attention was more focused on how he addressed him. Dumbledore. That familiar feeling came over me once again. Person was certain that the sense of familiarity did not come from the dragon's legacy, but from his memories of his past life. But where exactly did it come from? He couldn't remember for a moment. It's just a few letters. I hear people calling me an old madman every day, Dumbledore said gently, trying to soothe me. But it's not the same. Cornelius Fudge stubbornly shook his head. You are Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of our time. And I am just a lowly minister for magic, and I've only been in office for a year. All right, Cornelius, Dumbledore said with a hint of exasperation, as if coaxing a child for candy. This has nothing to do with you. If it happens to be exposed by accident, you can easily pin the blame on me. No, that's not what I meant. Fudge hurriedly waved his hand, but you could tell from the gleam in his small eyes that this was what he meant. Professor Dumbledore, I absolutely trust your decision. You are free to take the child with you whenever you wish. However, given the child's extraordinary destructive power, the Ministry of Magic must appoint a guardian for him to ensure that the public knows we have not done nothing. You, yes, it's you. The red-haired Weasley kid, right? From now on, you're this child's guardian. If you can control a dragon, controlling a child should be a piece of cake, right? With a few words, Fudge absolved himself of all responsibility, then pointed at the bewildered Charlie, ordering him in an inescapable tone, leaving him no room to refuse. Minister Fookie. Aye. Okay. Charlie forced a smile that looked more like a grimace, but since his father worked at the Ministry of Magic, he was terrified that Minister Fudge would say something like, You wouldn't want your father to lose his job, would you? Poison watched with great interest. Although he has become a dragon, he still retains a part of humanity within him. 11 years of isolation from the world were much harder to endure than he had imagined. More than once, he wanted to turn himself back into a human and visit the nearby human towns. Of course, not in the way we are now. Child, what's your name? Dumbledore ignored Fudge's theatrics and walked up to Person, bending down to look him in the eye. Since the decision had been made to outlast the old man, Person naturally had no reason to refuse to cooperate. However, out of the dragon's pride, he slightly raised his head and adopted a disdainful attitude. Person Saverick, the noble pure-blooded green dragon. Upon hearing the word pure-blood, Dumbledore's eyes instantly sharpened, but upon hearing the word green dragon following it, the corner of his mouth twitched inexplicably. Child, you are not a dragon, you are human, but magic has turned you into that form. Dumbledore tried to steer Poison back on track, but Poison just looked at him with disdain. Magic. Transformation into a dragon. How come he doesn't know he's still an archdruid? That old man is incredibly cunning. In order to better control him, he's even capable of fabricating such lies. Human, let's get straight to the point. Don't expect us to sign a master-servant contract. I am a noble dragon, and I would rather die fighting than submit to humans. Poison adopted a tough stance and took the initiative to probe the issue. As for whether they truly would rather die than surrender. A green dragon that doesn't lie. Is that really a green dragon? Aye. All right, Dumbledore said, raising his hands in surrender to show that he really meant no harm. Child, no one here will hurt you, and no one wants to sign a master-servant contract with you. Perhaps you should take a look at this first. Dumbledore first waved his wand to unlock Person's shackles, then reached into his wide robes, and under Person's wary gaze, pulled out a rolled-up parchment. This is for you, but unfortunately you'll have to add the name yourself. Dumbledore smiled and handed the parchment to Person. The back of the parchment depicted a totem of a lion, eagle, badger, and snake. Unfolding, it revealed a line of small writing in emerald green ink. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore. We are pleased to inform you that you have been admitted to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Enclosed is a list of required books and equipment. Enrollment. Wait. Hogwarts. Person's eyes widened uncontrollably, his fingers unconsciously tracing the neat handwriting on the letter, as if trying to confirm its authenticity. No, it can't be fake. Weasley, Dumbledore, the Ministry of Magic, Hogwarts. Person could not possibly forget these iconic figures and places, even after decades. Then there's only one possibility. He's traveled to the wrong world. The thought of having spent 11 years hiding in the deep mountains and forests because of the world in the dragon's legacy, where legends were as common as dogs and gods roamed everywhere, made Possum grit his teeth in resentment. If he had known this would happen, why would he have been so cautious? The overall strength of the Harry Potter world is not particularly high. Many wizards are not even as strong as ordinary people with guns. The level of technology is also far less advanced than in the previous world, so there is no need to worry about being exposed in the information age. Unfortunately, it's too late to say anything now. No matter how weak the Harry Potter world is, Person still has no chance of resisting Dumbledore, the strongest being of his time. At least, I don't have to worry about being locked up and having my blood drawn. Wait, one of Dumbledore's major achievements seems to include the 12 uses of dragon's blood. Person shuddered, realizing he was far from out of danger, and promptly borrowed a quill from Dumbledore to sign his name on the acceptance letter Congratulations, Mr. Person. From now on, you are also a student of Hogwarts. Dumbledore smiled as he brushed the grass clippings off Person's shoulder, then pulled Charlie forward. Let me introduce you. This is Charlie. He will be your guardian for the time being. You can ask him for help with purchasing textbooks and school supplies. Charlie forced a smile that looked more like a grimace, despite being a witness to the event and even the last one standing. He was well aware of the terrifying energy hidden within this seemingly harmless boy. However, under Dumbledore's influence and under Minister Fudge's seemingly kind but actually intimidating gaze, they were able to achieve their goals. He could only tremblingly extend his hand and say, "Hello, Mr. Person, from now on, I will be your guardian." Poison gripped those rough, large hands tightly, a bright smile spreading across his face. "I hope we can get along well, Mr. Charlie." The candlelight flickered, casting intermittent light and shadow on the boy's face. Between light and shadow, only those rows of exceptionally clean teeth reflected a chilling, eerie light under the lamplight. Chapter 3. The Dragon Stands Above All Things. Clang! The elevator slowly ascended. Charlie squeezed himself into the corner, looked at the seemingly honest boy in front of him, touched his nose, and cautiously suggested, "Well, Mr. Person, you see, since we're already in London and there's not much time left before school starts, why don't we head to Diagon Alley now and buy our school supplies? What do you think?" Can. Person nodded, naturally taking control of the conversation between the two, while his gaze swept up and down the seemingly old elevator and the busy ministry of magic officials outside, pondering what to do next. Should we run away? Dumbledore claimed he had to leave, but Person was unsure. He preferred to believe that Dumbledore was hiding somewhere, secretly observing his every move. Escape is definitely not an option. The risks are too great. Moreover, knowing that this is the relatively safe Harry Potter world, he would never accept Person hiding in the mountains as a wild dragon. It seems I have no choice but to enroll. Person was not opposed to Hogwarts itself. In fact, he even had a slight longing for it, having read the original story more than once in his previous life. What he truly found unbearable was that after entering Hogwarts, he had to maintain his transfiguration ability at all times and could not show his original form. No, I remember Hogwarts also has a forbidden forest. If we could take over that place, perhaps we could use it as a starting point to gradually expand our power. For dragons, territory, followers, and the ambition to rule the world are instincts etched into their very bones. Even though Person possessed a human soul, he couldn't help but feel a sense of longing as he watched countless green dragon predecessors in the dragon legacy rely on their strength and wisdom to establish, control, or destroy kingdoms large and small. If you can be kings, why can't I? All right, with my current strength, I really can't do it. Person let out a long sigh, suppressing his rampant ambition. Whatever he wanted to do, in his current dragon-like form, neither Dumbledore nor Voldemort were a match for him. Fortunately, Harry Potter's pretend play game lasted a maximum of 7 years. 7 years later, when everything has settled down, it will be time to welcome the Dragon King back to his throne. Before that, be careful, be cautious, study hard, and strive to become stronger, said the future Emerald King, the wings of calamity and the ruler of the world. Ding! The elevator slowly came to a stop, and the golden gate slid open to the left and right. A cold female voice said, "Main hall. Let's go quickly." Seeing a large number of tired and numb Ministry of Magic officials rushing toward the elevator doors, Charlie squeezed a passage with his body, and Person quickly followed. The main hall was very large, with a deep blue canopy covering the ceiling, where countless golden symbols twisted and turned, like a starry sky unique to the magical world. Beneath the starry sky, several enormous golden statues stood in the center of the main hall, including a noble-looking wizard, a beautiful witch, and centaurs, goblins, and house elves surrounding them with expressions of adoration. Person liked this statue, not only because they are golden, but also because they symbolize an attitude. Magic is power. One day, he will make the dragon stand at the very top of these statues. How is the situation? A cold female voice squeezed through the noisy crowd, carrying an inhuman chill. The voice sounded somewhat familiar. Following the direction of the sound, Posson saw a girl in a black robe with silver hair sitting alone on a bench. People around her always kept a distance from her, as if she were an iceberg floating on the sea. Audrey, didn't I tell you could go back first? Charlie's tone was rather helpless, but the girl completely ignored him, her attention focused entirely on Person. You are that green dragon? The girl asked softly. No, he isn't, Charlie interjected, then lowered his voice. Audrey, the Ministry of Magic requires us to keep this a secret. Now, I've inexplicably become this child's guardian, and I have to take him to buy school supplies first. We'll talk again when we get back to the protected area. As Charlie was speaking, he was about to lead Person away when Audrey suddenly grabbed Person's sleeve, startling Charlie so much that he almost screamed. I'm with you. Ignoring Charlie's frantic shaking of his head, the girl met Person's gaze fearlessly with her light blue eyes. No, it's not just about being fearless. In the girl's eyes, Person even detected a subtle hint of longing. What's going on? Person was puzzled, but then he remembered that she and Charlie were colleagues, and she was most likely a researcher in the Fire Dragon Reserve. For a researcher to suddenly turn into a human and be able to speak after half a lifetime of research might be an irresistible temptation for a researcher. However, Poison has no interest in being studied. Do you think I would want more people to tell me what to do? That was what Poison had intended to say. Unfortunately, Audrey gave too much. Wow! The heavy money bag slammed into Person's hand with a pleasant clinking sound. Person pulled the bag open, revealing a bag enchanted with a seamless expansion spell. Countless glittering, golden little darting objects nearly blinded him. You are a real dragon, aren't you? Audrey's tone was flat, as if she were casually handing over a piece of candy. Legend has it that dragons are generally obsessed with treasure. I wonder if this is enough for me to become your guardian. Don't worry, I won't order you around. Just let me stay by your side. Poison did not reply, but carefully put the money bag into his robe first, and then stretched out a hand. Dear Ms. Audrey, you may call me Person. It is my pleasure to serve you. Green dragons are such shameless creatures. Passing through the spacious main hall, ascending another elevator platform, and finally arriving at a red telephone booth on a street corner that seems to have been abandoned by the world. Outside the pavilion lies the world of muggles. Mr. Person, when you leave the phone booth, please don't revert to your dragon form, and don't discuss anything related to magic. I don't want to be sent to Azkaban for violating the secrecy laws. Charlie spoke with great seriousness, waving his wand and conjuring up a women's wool shirt and matching suit shorts for himself. Yes, shorts. Poison didn't know where he learned it from. Audrey's attire was much more normal. A sturdy willow branch supported the entire court dress, the hem of which had some pleats and was mostly sewn with gold thread, and her hair was styled in a high bun. Well, it's mostly normal, just a little mishap with the times. Realizing that the two were completely beyond saving, Person sighed softly. Fortunately, his clothes were created by magic and could be adjusted at will. As soon as Poisson had a thought, the magnificent emerald green robe began to tighten and deform, gradually splitting into 3 layers: the lining, the suit, and the tie. The dark green suit is made of high-count pure wool fabric, which is delicate and smooth, with the most natural drape and resilience. The lining is made of seamless and breathable silk, which feels cool and smooth to the touch. The dark green tie may seem ordinary, but it is full of details, with a 7-fold rolled edge and a hand-stitched center line at the hem, ensuring that the tie will always return to its natural position, no matter how it is twisted. Looking at the dashing figure reflected in the window, Poisson nodded in satisfaction. Only in this way can he be worthy of his identity as a green dragon. Chapter 4, Miss Beaver. Hello, you must be Sky, right? Please take us to the Leaky Cauldron. Don't know it. Charles Cross Road will do. It's between the bookstore and the record store. Just drop us off there. What? Why not use flu powder? Diona, don't you see how many people are in line? I can't afford the VIP pass. The beer-bellied driver gripped the steering wheel tightly, cold sweat pouring from his forehead. He swore to God he had never encountered such a bizarre combination. A woman's shirt paired with suit shorts, the man exudes an abnormal masculine aura. Dressed in a long court dress, she exuded an air of elegance and nobility, as if she were a woman from the last century. And sandwiched between the two, a well-dressed boy, looking every bit the elegant young master from a wealthy family. Oh, the boy's appearance was hardly elegant. It was clearly too much to ask of him to squeeze the woman's wide skirt into the car. Both the man and the boy were now forced to squeeze against the edge of the car window, with the boy clinging tightly to the hem of his skirt to avoid being accidentally swallowed up by it. It's the end of the 20th century, and cosplay isn't really popular in the world yet. To the honest and law-abiding driver, it was as if 3 lunatics had squeezed into his car without explanation and started gesturing wildly, as if it were an ordinary taxi. Damn it, he was just taking a nap downstairs in his own building, enjoying the only free time a married man can have. Seeing that the 3 people had no intention of getting off the bus, the driver sighed and started the vehicle again. There's no other way, let's open it. Married middle-aged working men can't withstand any storms. If you ask me, Muggle society is so much better than the wizarding world. They even offer free transportation. No wonder my dad is so fascinated by Muggles. Watching the car accelerate rapidly, kicking up a cloud of dust as it sped away. Charlie marveled at the humanity of Muggle society while complaining about the expensive fares and poor service of the night bus, saying it was incomparable to Muggle society. Person emerged from under Audrey's skirt, calmly fixed his hair, and glanced at the row of shops in front of him. Toy stores, bars, supermarkets, bookstores. Found it. Among the dazzling array of shops, Leaky Cauldron stands out as if time has forgotten this place, as if it were a place long forgotten. People around were hurrying by, ignoring the obviously suspicious bar. A few people did stop in front of the bar, but their eyes were more focused on the record store next door, where there were original recordings of the Beatles' concerts. Maybe I should buy a record before leaving. It seems like it's hard to find those in Romania, but Dad might be more interested in a record player. Charlie shook his head, no longer thinking about Christmas, which was still months away. Taking good care of his living father was the most important thing right now. Just before he stepped into the Leaky Cauldron bar, a restless female voice suddenly drifted into his ears. Dad, Mom. This is the address the professor gave us. We should hurry in, or we'll be too late. Be patient, Hermione. Nobody knows if there's any danger inside. Your mother and I can't even see the bar. The man's voice sounded rather helpless, and his wife beside him nodded in agreement. However, the girl called Hermione just kept pulling their hands, trying to drag them into the leaky cauldron. Hermione. Person remembered that the beaver girl with fluffy brown hair, brown eyes, and a pair of prominent front teeth seemed to be one of the main characters. It has nothing to do with him, so we don't need to pay attention to it. Person withdrew his gaze and was about to step into the leaky cauldron when he saw Charlie already beside Hermione's parents, asking enthusiastically, "Muggle family, your child is about to attend Hogwarts, right? Do you need any help?" "Oh, ah. Are you also a professor at Hogwarts?" Hermione's father, Mr. Granger, looked the three oddly dressed people up and down, his tone revealing a hint of distrust. "No, I'm a Hogwarts graduate, and I'm here today to buy school supplies for my brother." Minister Fudge forbade Charlie from revealing any information about poison, and Charlie, unsure how to explain, could only try to gloss over the situation. "Oh, this gentleman, he, is your brother, Mr. Granger's tone became more suspicious. On the one hand, although Charlie was not old, he had been dealing with dragons for many years and had many hideous scars on his body. In addition, his unkempt appearance made Charlie, who had just graduated, look more mature than Mr. Granger. On the other hand, there is temperament. Compared to Poison and Audrey, who were adorned with gold and silver, Charlie, wearing only half a pair of trousers, looked like a beggar crawling out of the sewers. Just as the Grangers were hesitating about whether to believe Charlie, Hermione, who was being protected behind them, bravely stepped forward and stood in front of Perseus. "Hello, my name is Hermione Granger." Hermione introduced herself quickly, rattling off a string of words before Poss could even speak. "I just received my acceptance letter today." "What's it called again?" "Right, Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall, who delivered the letter, told me it's a magic school. My parents initially thought she was playing a prank, but then Professor McGonagall turned a table into a pig right in front of them. Unfortunately, she had something come up at the last minute. She said that Headmaster Dumbledore wasn't following the rules when admitting students, and she had to go deal with it right away. She can't come to Diagon Alley with me today. Before receiving my Hogwarts acceptance letter, I had planned to attend St. Paul's School for Girls. After all, I've never believed in magic, and although my classmates' exam papers would inexplicably explode during exams, I thought it was just because they were under too much pressure. Judging from your appearance, you must be from the wizarding family Professor McGonagall mentioned, right? What's Hogwarts like? Is the competition fierce? Professor McGonagall also said that the wizarding world is divided into pure blood, half-blood, and wizards like me, who come from ordinary backgrounds. Good heavens, I've never been exposed to magic before. Will I fall behind right at the start of the semester? Oh, by the way, I don't know your name yet. May I ask what your name is?" Hermione finally shut up. Her chatter had been driving Person crazy. This girl is a real waste of her talent. She should be a comedian. "My name is Person Savenrick." Person extended his hand and gently shook hands with Hermione, casually replying, "As for your questions, what do you think wizards are? Hogwarts never trains useless people. Either you become a qualified wizard, or you become experimental subjects for other wizards. Mortal, cherish your last moments of leisure. Ignorance is sometimes a blessing. Hogwarts is far more dangerous than you imagine." Hearing Person's description, Hermione turned pale with fright, while the Grangers trembled with fear, wishing they could tear up the acceptance letter on the spot and take a taxi home. Seeing that his future junior was almost scared away, Charlie quickly tried to smooth things over. "Well, Person was just joking. He's actually a freshman this year and has never been to Hogwarts. In fact, Hogwarts is the safest place in the world. You can absolutely rest assured about that. Moreover, the wizarding world is no different from Muggle society. We also have governments and laws, and most people are more concerned about employment after graduation than their own safety. Is that so, Mr. Granger was somewhat convinced. Then, if I may ask, what do you do for a living? Me. Charlie scratched his scar, unable to hide his pride, and said, I study fire-breathing dragons. Chapter 5, That Damn Fairy. No, please believe me. Dragon researcher is truly a niche profession. Most professions in the magical world are absolutely safe. I chose this profession purely out of passion, not because I had no other choice. After much persuasion, Charlie finally managed to calm the Granger family down from their plan to tear up the letter and run away. Under Mr. Granger's skeptical gaze, he brought up his father, who was the head of the Department for the Prevention of Muggle Misuse. My father has always been very interested in Muggles. And his brother, Bill, who works for Gringotts in Egypt. Bill is the best cursebreaker. As for what a cursebreaker is, Mr. Granger clearly did not understand. But Gringotts is still easy to understand. To quote Charlie's father, Gringotts is the wizarding bank. What danger could an ordinary bank employee possibly face? Anywhere. Under Charlie's persistent persuasion, or rather, his deception, the Granger family finally stepped into the leaky cauldron. The bar was dimly lit. An old man with almost no hair, who looked like a shriveled walnut, was standing behind the counter wiping dirty glasses. Several old women were huddled in a corner sipping sherry, while three men, who seemed to be chatting idly, were actually keeping their eyes fixed on Person and his companions. Mr. Granger slowed his pace and subtly pulled his wife and children closer. He began to regret his rash decision. Auras, Person raised an eyebrow as he looked at the three men who made no attempt to conceal their true identities. Charlie shook his head. No, I'm not quite sure either. Before leaving, he had not heard that Minister Fudge had any plans to send Aura. However, considering his position in the Ministry of Magic, he felt that even if the minister really had such a plan, he would not tell him. Let's hurry up and go. Seeing that the three were gradually turning their attention to the Granger family, Charlie took the lead and led everyone across the bar to a small courtyard behind the bar. He disliked the way these people looked at him. Their eyes were greedy and dangerous, always reminding him of the poachers roaming near the protected area. That's the look in someone's eyes when looking at prey. Don't worry, Charlie reassured the somewhat uneasy Grangers. The Leaky Cauldron and Diagon Alley are both under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Magic, second only to Hogwarts in terms of safety. Nobody dares to cause trouble here. As he spoke, he drew his wand, went to the wall behind the trash can, counted 3 tiles up and 2 tiles down, and gently tapped them. Compared to these, Charlie took a step back, a hopeful smile spreading across his face, and declared loudly, Welcome to Diagon Alley, everyone. Boom! The bricks that had been struck shook violently, began to move and contract, and the wall slid open to both sides like a curtain, revealing the endless cobblestone street behind it. A cacophony of voices, the hooting of owls, the tinkling of cauldrons dancing automatically outside the shop, the clamor of magic, engulfed everyone like a tidal wave. This is truly unbelievable. The Grangers stared wide-eyed. The hesitation and fear they had felt at the leaky cauldron had vanished, replaced only by the sheer awe of the miracle unfolding before their eyes. Hermione's mouth was slightly open, and for once she was no longer anxious about exams, studies, or falling behind. Instead, she let herself immerse herself in the ocean of magic. Even Person couldn't help, but let out a small gasp at this moment. The scenes in Dragon Legacy may be more magnificent, but they are ultimately someone else's memories, lacking this down-to-earth sense of life. But this beautiful moment didn't last long. "Get out of the way, kid." Suddenly, a pair of large hands reached out and roughly tried to push Poison aside. It didn't move. Despite his small stature, Person's true form was a dragon nearly 20 feet long, whose strength far surpassed that of humans. After trying for a long time, the large hand couldn't move Poison even a millimeter, so it had to change its target and squeeze through the Granger family. "It's those guys from the bar." As Charlie watched the three figures disappear into the distance, he frowned. He could still hear the leader's undisguised complaints. "Another bunch of smelly muggles. And that weird kid, damn it, is he born of a troll?" Faced with this sudden malice, the Granger family was somewhat at a loss, while Audrey quietly drew her wand and chanted an unknown evil curse, seemingly preparing to unleash her fury. Person pressed down on her wand and shook her head gently. Regardless of whether those three were auras or not, getting into a conflict with someone in a busy area is clearly not a wise choice. "The key is..." Person closed his eyes and activated his perception of magic. A thin, pale blue thread hung from his shoulder like a parasite, with the other end connected to the leading man. Things are getting interesting. Poison slightly curled the corners of his mouth. Whatever the purpose of this group, they clearly had no intention of letting the matter rest. Fortunately, Poison was not prepared to give up easily. "Now, all we need to do is wait and see." Following the silk threads, Poison could sense that the three had not gone far. Instead, they had circled around and returned to their backs. The pale blue silk threads shimmered like fireflies in the darkness. "Ignore them. They're just a bunch of self-proclaimed nobles, ignorant pure-blood zealots. They're obviously from Slytherin." Charlie was still comforting the terrified Grangers, but in his words, Slytherin had become an insult. "All I can say is, they truly live up to their reputation as Gryffindor." Ignoring the three suspected Slytherins, Charlie led the group to Gringotts to exchange wizarding currency for the Granger family. The goblins of Gringotts clearly didn't like Queen Elizabeth. When they saw the few pounds Mr. Granger handed them, their expressions were as if they had seen a jerk walk into the counter with a gun, their faces practically screaming robbery. Fortunately, after Mr. Granger realized that the pounds were not working, he promptly exchanged them for 2 small gold bars. The fairy behind the counter smiled again and became much more respectful. "Person, aren't you planning to open a vault?" Charlie looked at Person, or more precisely, at the small wallet Person had hidden in his sleeve, which contained more galleons than his annual salary. Person shook his head decisively. "Unless I'm insane, I wouldn't hand over my gold coins to a bunch of greedy goblins." His gaze lingered on the small characters engraved on the second silver door. "Thief, you have been warned. Beware, for what you bring is not treasure, but retribution." Charlie read the last line aloud, then looked at Person with some concern and asked, "You're not thinking of robbing Gringotts, are you?" "I advise you to give up that idea. Gringotts has. Well, just forget about it." Charlie wanted to say that there were dragons in Gringotts, but he suddenly remembered what kind of monster this seemingly harmless boy was, and obediently shut his mouth. To Person, if Gringotts guards are a fire dragon, then what difference does it make if they don't exist? Although the Weasley family's vault always only had a few silver sieves left, Charlie still didn't intend to risk their entire fortune. "No, of course I'm not that stupid." Person knew he was still under observation, and any slight movement would touch a nerve with Dumbledore. However, watching the fairies push boxes of gold coins into the underground, he couldn't help but tear up. Those damned fairies. How dare they build Gringotts on top of his treasury? Chapter 6, Hermione, What kind of magic have you learned? Leaving Gringotts, what follows is the familiar routine. Crucibles, textbooks, school uniforms, binoculars, blah, blah, blah. Hermione came out of the bookstore and immediately began devouring a thick blue book. Although Charlie explained more than once that Hogwarts would never tie failing students to the laboratory table, the girl clearly had her own principles. Poison, then, chose a magic wand for himself. 15 inches, ebony, fire dragon heartstring. I chose this one not because it was particularly suitable for me. As a natural spellcaster, the green dragon has no need for wands at all. On the contrary, the wands are all vying for Poison's favor. Among these, the Fire Dragon Heartstring Staff Core is the best. And among the cores of the Fire Dragon Heartstring Wand, this ebony wand is the most capable of getting things done. While other wands were still striving to unleash bigger sparks and brighter stardust, it chose a different path, spitting out a line of crooked, small words. His Majesty, the Great Person, is about to arrive at his faithful Hogwarts. It's so eager to improve. Feeling the wand tremble slightly in his hand, Person immediately made the decision, indicating to Audrey to pay for it. Strain. That shouldn't be the case. My father clearly told me that it's the wand that chooses the wizard, not the wizard that chooses the wand. Mr. Ollivander muttered to himself, pressing down on his wand, which was brimming with excitement. From his perspective, Person simply beckoned with his finger, and all the wands stirred like wildcats in heat, abandoning even the most basic restraint expected of wands. This isn't magic. The old man's eyebrows were already half buried in the ground, yet he had never seen anything so bizarre. Mr. Ollivander, whose worldview had collapsed, could only cling tightly to the magic wand he had painstakingly crafted, futilely trying to prevent it from being stolen away by this blonde-haired guy who had suddenly appeared out of some unknown internet cafe. Pain, it hurts so much. Seeing that Mr. Ollivander was already immersed in his art, Poison felt it would be impolite to disturb him any further. As I left the wand shop, the ebony wand excitedly spewed sparks, like a victorious concubine in a palace drama, urging the emperor to banish the entire harem to the cold palace. All right, behave yourself. Person tapped the ebony wand lightly with his index finger, and it immediately became still, smoothly retracting into his sleeve. Let me see, just a moment. Charlie struggled to take off all the bags and packages he was carrying, and after comparing them with the enrollment list, he struggled even more to hang them back on his body. Very good, everything's bought. Mr. Granger, if you're ready to go home, just go back the way you came. You don't need to trigger any mechanisms to leave Diagon Alley. Mr. Granger looked at Charlie, who was swaying and looked like he could fall at any moment. He then glanced at Person and Audrey, who stood beside Charlie empty-handed and showed no intention of helping. He seemed to want to speak, but then stopped, and then spoke again. Ultimately, I decided not to get involved in other people's family affairs. Well then, goodbye, Mr. Charlie, Mr. Granger waved his hand. If your father is really interested in record players, I might be able to give you one, but it will be a second-hand one. I happen to be thinking of getting a new cassette player soon. Thanks, but no need, Charlie shrugged somewhat helplessly. To be honest, my dad is a bit too obsessed with all sorts of muggle creations. As the head of the department for the prohibition of the abuse of muggle items, it's really not a good hobby. My mom has complained about it more than once. Besides, Mom said Dad seems to have gotten his hands on a junk car somewhere, and he's probably busy taking it apart right now, so he doesn't have time to deal with a regular record player. Oh, speaking of which, maybe I should give him a wrench. Charlie continued to worry about Christmas gifts, but couldn't come up with a solution that would satisfy everyone, so he decisively put the problem out of his mind and focused on the task at hand. After watching the Grangers walk away, Charlie, considering it was a rare trip to Diagon Alley, decided to replenish supplies for the dragon's sanctuary. I need to get a few bottles of burn ointment, and I should probably replace my dragon skin gloves. Also, the Nimbus broomstick. It seems they've released a new model. The Nature Reserve might consider getting one, but this suggestion will most likely end up being dug up from some trash can, just like last time. Charlie muttered to himself, but Person raised an eyebrow and fixed his gaze on the direction the Granger family had left in. Looks like the big fish is finally going to bite, but unfortunately, it's not biting me. From the moment he entered Diagon Alley until now, Person had never let his guard down around the 3 suspected Slytherins, and the 3 tagalongs certainly did not disappoint him, sticking to the very back of the group ever since they entered Gringotts. But now things have changed. The light blue silk thread stopped following Poison and turned back towards its source. The group's location also began to change. Judging from their direction, they seem to be chasing after the Granger family. It doesn't look like an aura. Person didn't think that the Granger family, as an ordinary Muggle family, deserved more attention from the Ministry of Magic than he did. The situation was already clear. Those people were just a group of robbers who acted on impulse. And most likely, their strength isn't very high. Fine, even though this has nothing to do with me. You guys insulted me before, so I guess I'll just have to accept my bad luck. Poison gave a cold laugh, a cruel smile curving his lips. He didn't actually care whether the other person had provoked him or not. He just wanted to find an excuse to give those people a legitimate and severe beating, in order to vent his anger at being captured by Dumbledore. If I can't beat Dumbledore, I can beat you guys, right? Let's go check out Dr. Philip's fireworks shop first. It seems he's launched his own burn prevention medicine, and we can also get some gifts for Fred and George while we're at it. Charlie was still planning his route when he turned around and found that Person had already run far away, and Audrey was following behind without saying a word, leaving him standing there dumbfounded. It looked like a puppy that had been abandoned by its owner. Hey, wait for me. Where are you going? Charlie waved his wand, and the cauldrons, textbooks, and other miscellaneous items on his body floated up, and he pulled them along as he desperately chased after Person, like pulling on a balloon. Person. Mr. Person. Uncle Person. What's wrong with you again? That's Knockout Alley ahead. We can't go in. After a long run, a panting Charlie finally caught up with Person. He was about to lean against the wall to rest for a while, but looking at the sticky wall covered with bloodstains and what appeared to be urine stains, he decided to squat down next to Person and whispered to him. We can't go any further. Knockturn Alley is the most dangerous and darkest place in all of London. Only the most vicious dark wizards and wanted criminals hide there. Even I. Cough, even you can't guarantee my safety. Charlie was quite self-aware. Well, mainly because she was very self-aware of her position in Poison's heart. If a fight really breaks out, this father will absolutely not care whether he lives or dies. In the heat of the moment, he might even get slapped a couple of times himself. Just as they were about to continue persuading them, several familiar figures suddenly came into view. The Grangers were cornered and trembling, and 3 people who appeared to be Slytherins blocked the way, but judging from their expressions, they seemed a little confused as well. And standing at the very center, it was Hermione, head held high and chest puffed out, like a victorious rooster. This is illegal, Hermione shouted righteously. According to Section 11 of the Muggle Protection Act, the use of any magic that constitutes undue harm against Muggles is prohibited. Furthermore, although my parents are considered wizarding families, they only learned of the existence of the wizarding world today. Given the Ministry of Magic's efficiency, they most likely haven't even been registered as informed muggles yet. Your actions may also violate the International Wizarding Union's Secrecy Act. Finally, you used a confusion charm to induce my parents to damage merchandise, thereby demanding exorbitant compensation. According to Section 47 of the Ministry of Magic's Consumer Protection Scheme, your actions constitute extortion and are also a criminal offense. So, if you don't want to spend your whole life in Azkaban, you'd better let us leave now. Under the shocked gazes of everyone, Hermione proudly raised her slightly flushed face, which was flushed with nervousness and excitement. Suddenly, the lining of a thick blue book slipped off and hit the ground with a dull thud. It was clearly written above. The Laws of the British Ministry of Magic. Chapter 7. Without Dumbledore, I am invincible. Boss, what do we do? This guy's tough. The three robbers shuddered at the sight of the petite but imposing girl. Even though it's been almost 10 years since they graduated, their memories still involuntarily drift back to their freshman year, to that night when Professor McGonagall caught them out for a night stroll. I saw her shadow in you. While the three were still in a daze, Charlie quickly squeezed next to Mr. Granger and asked, "What's going on? Why are you in Nocturne Alley? And what's this about extortion and rights protection that Hermione mentioned? Is it some kind of muggle code? Please forgive me, but as a pure-blooded Gryffindor, Charlie is allergic to all legal provisions." "No, I'm not entirely sure either, Mr. Granger replied, still shaken. "We were planning to go home, but as we walked, we realized we were going the wrong way. Just as we were about to turn back, these three men suddenly bumped into us, saying that we had damaged their ancestral statue and that we had to pay them 500 gallons. They're scammers." Hermione angrily pointed at the goblin statue on the ground, which had been smashed and had a hole punched in it. "Look at this. This statue was broken to begin with. The upper and lower parts are even made of different materials. It's obviously just a hastily pieced-together piece." Person stepped forward, ignoring the statue on the ground, and picked up Hermione's General Survey of Laws of the British Ministry of Magic, gently brushing off the dust from the back, and asked curiously, Putting everything else aside, what's with this book? I thought you were studying magic, but it turns out you're studying law. The law is far more effective than magic." Hermione proudly curled her little nose. Although according to Hogwarts, a history, what you said is complete nonsense. But it does remind me that as a child from a Muggle family, facing a completely unfamiliar magical world, I must find a way to protect myself. At this point, I hope readers will remember our domain name. 202, letter 1D0, B letter 1D0, BS. Letter 1D04, letter 1D0F, letter 1D0D. Magic. No, no, no. Facing pure-blood and half-blood wizards who have been learning magic since childhood, even if I practice diligently 24 hours a day, I probably won't be able to catch up with them in a short time. But the law is different. I've studied Hogwarts curriculum, and until we graduate from 7th grade, there aren't any law-related courses. Many people only learn about the law after they've broken one. In just half an hour, I can become invincible in wizard battles. Good guy. Poison exclaimed, "Wow. If you lose, you go to the hospital. If you win, you go to jail." It's surprising that Hermione has grasped this truth at such a young age. "However," Person said, throwing cold water on Hermione's overconfidence, "have you ever considered this? The reason the wizarding world doesn't value legal education is because the Ministry of Magic's bunch of incompetents can't catch criminals at all." "Ha!" Hermione was stunned. "Oh, right." The trio of robbers snapped back to reality. Person recalled the group of auras. Although their numbers were considerable, they were still no match for him. It's like a group of elementary school students who were tricked into the boxing ring. Their teacher told them that they could cancel their homework if they knocked down anyone, so they ended up choosing tarot from a group of Tysons. That's quite a challenge. Person, what are you reminding them to do? Seeing the trio grinning maliciously again, Hermione was so anxious she almost cried. Kid, you almost fooled me. The gang leader pulled out his magic wand, deciding to stop pretending and switch from extortion to outright robbery. Behave yourself and hand over the money. And you Slytherin brat in the green shirt, I wasn't planning on swindling you out of our shared house, but since you've come to me willingly, don't blame me for being heartless. What should I do? Hermione frantically flipped through the laws of the British Ministry of Magic, the dense legal clauses flashing before her eyes. But the law is not magic after all, and cannot give people power. Mr. Granger sighed softly and reached for his wallet hidden in the lining. Well, if it's better to lose money than to suffer a terrible loss, then he'll have to think carefully about whether or not to tear up that damned acceptance letter once he gets home. Wait, don't rush. Charlie suddenly grabbed his hand, pointed at Poison who had stepped forward, and looked at him strangely. Kid, are you going to beg for mercy? The gang leader lowered his head, looked at the boy who wasn't even half his height, and smiled contemptuously. This kid is indeed a bit strange. His strength is terrifying, but in the face of true magic, everything is nothing but a collapse. Person, come back quickly. Hermione anxiously tugged at Person's sleeve, trying to pull him back. Relax. Faced with Hermione's distrust, Persephone simply waved his hand, signaling her to calm down. Gentlemen, let's talk about compensation. Because of this. Ah, disgusting statue. You want my friend to pay you 500 gallons, right? Person raised his head, revealing an impeccable smile. His amber eyes did not look at the robbers' faces, but instead fell on their clothes, as if he were assessing something. What? Are you planning to pay for your girlfriend's money? Ha, what a touching love story. The bandit leader said sarcastically, which made Hermione blush instantly and draw her wand with a whoosh. Person, don't give in to these bastards. Diagon Alley is right next door. Even if the Ministry of Magic is incompetent, they can still react from that distance. Seeing Hermione's Gryffindor spirit burning brightly, a state commonly known as going all out without thinking, Perseus pressed down on her wand, her tone still gentle. Gentlemen, judging by your attire, you probably don't have much money in your pockets, do you? 100 gallons should be a very fair price. Poison. Shut up, brat, the gang leader shouted sternly. Person's condescending attitude always reminded him of those pure-blooded bastards in the academy. Even though they were the weaker party, they insisted on putting on a condescending posture, as if it was a great honor to speak to you. Kid, I've changed my mind, the gang leader said, his gaze fixed on Person's expensive suit. He licked his lips greedily. You pure-blooded nobles aren't short of money anyway, so why not give me some? 800 galleons. Not a penny less, and you won't leave Nocturne Alley unscathed. You bunch of bastards. Hermione was furious and wanted nothing more than to rush up and take these people down with her, but a soft laugh suddenly came from beside her. I think you might have misunderstood something. Person clapped his hands gently, as if he had heard some funny joke. Gentlemen, I'm not giving you money. You're buying your own lives. 3 fools, 100 gallons. A good deal, isn't it? You're asking for it. Thunderous explosion. A burst of intense flame shot from the tip of the staff. Hermione screamed and tried to push Person away. The bandit leader let out a hearty laugh. He had long wanted to teach these arrogant bastards a lesson. But it faced the rapidly approaching red light. Poison simply stretched out a hand, as if catching an apple, and casually grasped the spell in his palm. Don't want. Boom! With a loud bang, flames erupted in his palm, but Person's body didn't even sway. Only those hands, which had been covered by emerald green scales at some point, looked ferocious and terrifying, like the cruel claws of an evil dragon. Cole! Possum gently blew a breath, and the charred layer on his palm dissipated, revealing the smooth, pristine dragon scales underneath. As expected, with Dumbledore gone, I am invincible. Chapter 8 Mithril Growth. Monster. You're a monster. The battle that follows. No, it shouldn't be called a battle. For Poison, it was just a game. 3 chattering little mice tried to escape his control, but they couldn't even break through his defenses. Whoosh! A stun spell struck Person's face, but the emerald green scales seemed to possess a mind of their own and immediately shifted away. The spell merely cast a light on the scales before bouncing off in another direction, striking an unlucky robber who couldn't dodge in time. Oh my God! Not only the robbers, but even the Grangers were stunned. They saw Poison as if he were Napoleon reincarnated, killing the robbers in a rout. What? What's going on with these scales of yours? It was the sharp-eyed Hermione who noticed the dragon scales on Person's body, but she didn't think of it as a dragon turning into a human, assuming it was some kind of magic. It's just some little trick of bloodline inheritance. You can't learn it, Person casually remarked, shattering the girl's illusions. Bloodline inheritance, something that can't be learned. The barriers of class had never felt so heavy, suffocating Hermione. What should I do? Professor McGonagall clearly stated that there is no difference between pure-blood wizards and ordinary wizards. But look at this pure-blood young master, who single-handedly beat up 3 ordinary wizards. Can this be considered as having no difference? These are 2 completely different species. Hermione looked down at the book, The Laws of the British Ministry of Magic, in her hand, feeling only a bleak future ahead. As an ordinary person, what should she do in this lawless and dangerous magical world? Today is another day of trying to survive. The girl on one side struggles to survive, while the robber on the other side is almost dead. The entire battle lasted no more than 5 minutes. 3 robbers were knocked to the ground, 2 of the underlings had already passed out, and only the leader stubbornly raised his head, accusing Poison of grabbing his hair with his eyes. One price, 33 galleons, just for my life. The still-awake leader decisively made the offer, selling out his 2 underlings. Without wasting words with him, Poison slapped him unconscious a few times, then sent him to reunite with his underlings, taking the money from the 3 of them as well. The 3 of them together had a total of 37 galleons, 5 sickles, and 11 gnats. It turned out that the leader hadn't sold out his underlings. He simply couldn't afford to buy them. A bunch of paupers. Person curled his lip in disdain, and adhering to the principle of picking up the goose that had passed by, he picked up the half of the fairy statue on the ground. As Hermione said, the upper and lower parts of the statue are made of different materials. The lower part is made of some kind of magical metal, while the upper part looks like it was just randomly pieced together with mud, and it was put together very roughly, as if it was afraid that it wouldn't break if it was bumped or knocked over. When Poison pried open the mud, he discovered it was a cup. Oh, not that cup. No one knows what the design concept behind this metal cup is. Perhaps it was to highlight the fairy's long and pointed nose, or perhaps the creator simply wanted to experience the feeling of drinking snot. In short, this silver cup may be an heirloom, but no one wants to spend a lot of money to collect half a fairy's head, so it can only end up as a tool for extortion. Judging from this, it's a product from before the Second Fairy Rebellion. Charlie stepped forward, naturally assuming the role of the appraiser. He was not surprised at all by Person's complete annihilation of the robbers, and even felt a little proud. Both the auras and the dark wizards were defeated by Person. Apart from Dumbledore, he was the only human who had faced Person directly and escaped unscathed. In other words, he is the number one person after Dumbledore. Is it valuable? Ignoring the somewhat smug Charlie, Person went straight to the question that concerned him most. Charlie took the silver cup, examined it, and handed it back to Bossong, shaking his head regretfully. It's worthless. After the second fairy rebellion was quelled, too many fairy creations flowed into wizarding society. A cup lacking rarity is just a cup. All right. Poison was not surprised by the result. If the cup were worth anything, its owner wouldn't have gone out of his way to target muggles for extortion. What interested Poison even more was the material of the silver cup. Gently wipe away the dirt from the silver cup. The smooth metal surface gleams faintly in the sunlight. This is not simply a reflection. When Poison covered it with his palm, one could see that the silver cup itself was emitting a pale blue glow. This is mithril, Charlie explained before Person could ask, demonstrating his keen insight. The fairies used to use mithril for forging. This metal is very tough and rich in magic. However, this metal is of little use to wizards, and after the Third Goblin Rebellion, the Ministry of Magic simply prohibited any person or creature from using mithril to forge items. Of course, given mithril's unique properties, in reality, only goblins can forge them. As a pure-blooded Gryffindor, it's rare that Charlie hasn't forgotten this history, which shows that he harbors deep resentment towards fairies. Very sturdy. Poison flicked the silver cup with his finger, and it made a clear, ringing sound. Then, in front of everyone, he stuffed the fairy's nose into his mouth. Click! With a crisp crack, the long nose snapped off. Person smacked his lips twice, as if savoring the moment, and a warm current immediately flowed into his body, strengthening his bones and scales. You ate it. Charlie instinctively tried to pry the mithril out of Poison's mouth, but when he met those amber vertical pupils full of warning, he decisively chose to follow his heart. What should I do if a baby dragon is possessive of its food? The nature reserve didn't teach us either. Ignoring Charlie, who was starting his own internal monologue again, Poison shoved the entire silver cup into his mouth. Whether they are five-colored dragons or metal dragons, they all have the habit of eating various minerals. Relying on their powerful stomach acid and ridiculously good teeth, all metals will become the dragon's nourishment. And Poison is the best of them all. At a very young age, Poison discovered that his energy absorption efficiency far exceeded that of ordinary young dragons. For him, eating is not only a necessary activity to sustain life, but also a means to strengthen himself and a catalyst to accelerate his growth. He can easily block all kinds of spells and awaken shapeshifting in the young dragon stage. This is not because he suddenly exploded when he encountered a crisis, but because of the accumulation of his abilities over the past 11 years. Well, with such incredible talent, it's a shame he still couldn't beat Dumbledore. However, the reason why Poison's development was so slow was mainly because he had been too timid for the past 11 years, and that grove of trees simply could not provide him with the various magical nutrients he needed. But now, things are different. He was no longer an evil and cunning dragon that everyone hated, but an ordinary Hogwarts freshman. He has plenty of channels to obtain the supplies he needs. As expected, I still need to make more money. Person's thoughts drifted back to his vault and the group of fairies temporarily residing there. Sooner or later, I will take back everything that is rightfully mine. Chapter 9, Goblins. There's no rush to find a way to make money right now. After leaving Diagon Alley and saying goodbye to the somewhat dazed Granger family, Person and the others didn't rush to leave the leaky cauldron. Find a way to survive. The strength. Hermione's voice drifted away on the wind, and Charlie worried that the girl might turn to the dark side. However, for him, the most important thing right now was to consider the next step. There's still more than 2 weeks until school starts, and we might need to find a place to stay again. What do you guys think of Leaky Cauldron? Charlie didn't mention his old home, the burrow, because in his eyes, poison was still a dangerous time bomb, and if it really exploded, his family certainly couldn't stop it. Thinking of this, Charlie looked at his boss Tom and the other drinkers with a hint of apology. I'm sorry, but what can I do when it's better to die than to die myself? Person ignored Charlie's ulterior motives and wasn't interested in the swarming burrow. The best outcome would naturally be the leaky cauldron, which was right next to Diagon Alley. However, before that, Charlie, I need to get my men over here first. Person stepped out of the bar and surveyed the open space around him. Subordinates, Charlie shuddered. What else could subordinates of a dragon be? Are there other baby dragons? Audrey's eyes lit up instantly. It was only at times like this that she would speak up. Unfortunately, Person shook his head. No, I don't have that ability. He ruthlessly shattered the girl's beautiful dream and quickly found an empty space on the side of the well-connected streets, which looked like an abandoned park. Ah, how do you plan to get back? Seeing the satisfied smile on Poison's face, Charlie felt a sense of foreboding and spoke up to warn him. That forest is quite a distance from London. I recommend using flu powder to get to the nearest town. Forget apparition. I'm not Dumbledore. I can't take you with me. No need for that, Person said, as he crossed the street to the park while no one was around, urging Charlie and Audrey to hurry up and follow. Only after they had completely disappeared into the grove of trees did he reveal his plan. We can just fly there. Blow. The thick clouds were cleaved open by the dragon's head, and the fierce winds were torn to shreds by the churning of the giant wings. A green shadow reflected a faint light in the blinding sunlight high in the sky, like an unstoppable warship about to bring death to the whole world. Charlie didn't know whether the world would die or not. Anyway, he was somewhat dead under the dragon's claws. Slow down. Slow down. Charlie yelled and screamed, but the gale was like a seasoned boxer, always managing to knock his voice back into his throat with pinpoint accuracy. The other side. Poison, however, felt more exhilarated than ever before. A cool breeze made the scales tremble slightly, and the huge dragon wings drove them freely. This was a feeling called freedom. Since its birth, the cautious Poison has never flown beyond the height of the treetops, never soared freely among the clouds, and never had to worry about being torn to pieces by a passing hero or archmage. Arrive. With the familiar forest right in front of it, Perseus not only did not slow down, but instead rapidly increased its altitude, then folded its wings and plummeted to the ground like a space-based weapon from a science fiction novel. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Charlie wailed and squeezed his eyes shut, blood rushing uncontrollably to his feet. However, the scene of him being smashed into a bloody pulp with a splat did not occur as one might imagine. Just as Poison was about to embrace the ground, he spread his enormous wings that blotted out the sky and flapped them forcefully. Sir. The hurricane lifted his body, and the trees were blown into submission. It was as if a great emperor was announcing to this forest that he had returned like lightning. Loosen the dragon's claws. A pale-faced Charlie staggered to his feet, struggling to regain his balance. After several attempts, he finally collapsed onto the grass, face down, feeling utterly resigned to his fate. He felt he never wanted to fly again, not even in his beloved Quidditch. On the other side, Audrey slid down Poisson's smooth scales, her little face flushed, seemingly still wanting more. As for why one is on the dragon's claw and the other on its back, Poisson asked, can free-to-play players receive the same treatment as whales? So, Person, what exactly are your men? Charlie asked, his face still buried in the grass, his voice muffled. Ah, it seems you've just blocked the exit, Person offered a friendly reminder. Before Charlie could figure it out, a small hand suddenly reached into his nostril and tickled him. Then, as if it had found a way to exert force, it grabbed Charlie's nose hair and pulled hard. Awoo! Charlie screamed and sprang to his feet, pulling out the radish and pulling out the mud. A small, round, brownish-brown creature, shaped like a potato, crawled up his nose onto his face, seemingly a little afraid of heights. The king! The king is back. Although his body was still trembling a little, the moment he saw Person, the little guy's wrinkled face instantly broke into a smile. Like presenting a treasure, he used his nose hairs to control Charlie's body and pull him in front of Person. King. Food. Offering. All right, this isn't food. He's one of us. Person used his tail to tangle the little guy down. Charlie, still shaken, hid behind Person. More little potatoes poured out of the finally clear hole, some big and some small, but none taller than 2 feet. Your men are a bunch of goblins? Charlie asked in shock. That's right, Person nodded. As one of the 3 starter families of the young dragons, the goblin was naturally not someone he could miss. This is truly unbelievable. Looking at the goblins standing in rows like soldiers before Person, Charlie remembered his father saying that goblins were sentient beings. Why is it that his goblins only cause trouble in the garden, while Perseus's goblins are as obedient as house elves? Poison, of course, wouldn't tell him. Whenever there was a disobedient goblin, he would tie that guy to a tree and whip him hard with his tail. As expected, the older generation of imperialist fighters were still too authoritative. Oh, right, I still have some things I haven't taken. Possum slapped his forehead, remembering the wealth he had accumulated over the past 11 years. Although there wasn't much of it, for a greedy dragon, letting his wealth be taken away by some lucky person was worse than being killed. Leading Charlie and Audrey, and surrounded by a group of goblins, Person arrived at a waterfall. Pass through this small waterfall, and you'll find a hidden paradise inside. The cave, located right next to the waterfall, was unusually dry, as evidenced by the few goblins wiping it back and forth with rags at the cave entrance. Several vines hung down from the cave ceiling, with simple homemade candles tied to them. The faint candlelight flickered from side to side in the cave, not for lighting, but to make the pile of gold and silver jewels in the center of the cave shine even brighter. Under Charlie's gaze, which shifted from envy to doubt and finally to disbelief, Person rolled up the most dazzling gold ring at the top of the jewels and swept aside the other quartz, pyrite, and small pebbles buried at the bottom. Looking at the little nest he had lived in for nearly 11 years, Possong felt a rare sense of reluctance. No matter what, thank you for sheltering me from the storm for the past 11 years. Next, I will step into a new world. Chapter 10. The great person is about to arrive at his faithful Hogwarts. Do. The little wooden bird flapped its wings, chirped, landed on Possum's face, and pecked at his nose, reminding him it was time to get up. Sweet potato. Person rubbed his sleepy eyes and climbed out of the creaking old bed in the leaky cauldron. A reddish-skinned goblin immediately jumped onto the bed and draped a Hogwarts school robe over him. The goblin responsible for putting on socks stretched out his foot and squeezed past the 2 goblins carrying leather shoes, as if it were some great honor. Dozens of goblins were crowding around the bed, trying to lift it up, but they weren't strong enough, so Person had to walk to the wash basin himself. As soon as he opened his mouth, another group of goblins, carrying toothbrushes and water cups, began to move. Audrey then came behind Person and skillfully combed his messy black hair. "Look at you dressed like that. Are you going to beg on the street to blind them? Oh, my dear, you're the most handsome human I've ever seen." Just as the mirror in front of the sink was about to deliver a sharp critique, a heavy hammer slammed down on the sink, behind which stood a short, fat goblin with a ferocious face. It decisively changed its aesthetic. "Person, you." Although he saw this scene every morning, Charlie still hesitated to speak and eventually let out a long sigh, deciding that he should just continue frying his bacon. Then he watched helplessly as the bacon was snatched away by the goblins and presented to Possum. "Hey, I fried this." Charlie attempted to claim ownership, but was met only with the goblins' furious table pounding and Poisson's disdain. "It's a bit overcooked. It should have been sprinkled with some minced garlic." "Then why don't you make it yourself?" After spending half a month together, Charlie was already daring to retort. But that's all. If he said anything more, those loyal goblins would jump up and punch him in the knee. Holy crap, how did they even manage to tune Poison? Even house elves don't have such an outrageous tuning. After breakfast, in Possant only, everyone started packing their luggage. Today is September 1st, the first day of school at Hogwarts. Hurry up, all of you. Line up one at a time. Person was directing the goblins into the suitcase. Both Charlie and Audrey, as researchers of fire dragons, were experts in illegal, traceless extension spells. "Potato," Person said, looking at the sturdiest goblin, "keep an eye on them. Smash anyone who tries to crawl out of the box." Potato gripped its precious hammer tightly, and even its gloomy expression, unique to goblins, brightened considerably, though the other goblins looked even gloomier. He continued packing up the bar's toothbrushes, soaps, shampoo, combs, bedding, and more. As Person greeted old Tom with a smile, Charlie always felt an urge to turn himself in. Leaving Diagon Alley, it was the same familiar outfit, the same familiar car, and the same familiar driver. "Brother, I didn't even stop the car this time. This is too much." The beer-bellied driver looked like he was about to cry. This man in his 40s was acting like a child, all wronged. Person pretended not to hear and clung to the speeding car, signaling the driver to open the door. Charlie didn't think there was anything wrong with it. When he was studying Chinese fireballs in Asia, he had heard that a certain distant country also used this method of taking trains. "Driver, please go to King's Cross Station." Charlie felt he was becoming more and more familiar with Muggle life. If he had taken a taxi more often back then, his Muggle studies class wouldn't have only barely gotten an E. Good. Upon arriving at King's Cross Station, the place was almost completely packed with strange men dressed in black robes. The poor subway security guard had to stop a mysterious wizard almost every 50 seconds, question him about whether he was a terrorist, and then get hit with a confusion charm and have to squat in a corner of the passage counting mushrooms. "Hurry up, he's about to wake up again." Urged on by the aura in charge of security, Charlie quickened his pace, pushing his luggage. At this moment, he actually missed the group of irritable goblins. At the very least, when those goblins were around, it wasn't his place to serve Person. The goblins would scramble to carry Person's luggage, along with him, onto their bodies. "This is it, platform 9¾ Just run it over." Upon reaching the brick wall between platform 9 and platform 10, Charlie deliberately waited a while longer, allowing his parents to pass through with his younger siblings and an unfamiliar dark-haired boy before entering the platform at a later time. After spending half a month together, Charlie had determined that, in the vast majority of cases, Poison was harmless. At the very least, their family's assets were not enough to tempt Possum to greed. His main problem was that he didn't know how to explain to his parents why he suddenly had a child after working away from home for a year. Although the child is adopted, and it's still unclear who the father is, legally speaking, he is indeed Poisson's guardian. Hopefully, Minister Fauché can find this child a reliable family. Looking back on the past 2 weeks, Charlie was quite emotional. He did have some feelings for the man, but he felt that the silent fire dragons were easier to deal with than the man who was serving this man. The sound of the steam whistle pulled Charlie back to reality. They had passed through the wall and arrived at Station 9 3/4. A crimson train, billowing steam, pulled up beside a crowded platform. Several owls flew through the thick smoke, followed by a little wizard anxiously trying to bring them back. Person remembered the owl that didn't exist. He originally wanted to buy an eagle owl, but unfortunately, the animals in the pet store cowered in the corner and trembled when they saw him. The only brave one was a large ginger cat that hissed in response to stress. Fortunately, Poisson had no parents, so he generally didn't need an owl. Upon boarding the train, the front seats were already full, so Person simply pushed his luggage to the very back. A little beaver naturally followed behind, squeezing into the same compartment as Person. Person glanced at Hermione, who was clearly looking for him, and couldn't understand why the girl looked so relieved. But he didn't think much of it, and took out his Transfiguration textbook to flip through it casually. After awakening his transformation skills, these simple transformation spells were a piece of cake for Poison. However, since the bloodline inheritance was not something he learned on his own, the two completely different magic systems were just what he needed to fill in the gaps. On the other side, Hermione also pulled out a large stack of books, but the titles of these books: 100 Laws You've Definitely Broken, Muggle Protection Law Details, New Acts and Examples from the Ministry of Magic. The girl had also tried to pursue power, but when she opened her brand new spellbook, she saw similar small print under all the powerful spells. The arm's swing should be moderate. Pay attention to the volume of the incantation. Pause for a certain period during recitation. The hand gestures are quite complex. Please see the professor's demonstration in class for details. Summary: prevent self-learning. Hermione tried several times, but could only learn simple and harmless spells like glowing light, clear water, and levitation. Thinking that the young master of a pure-blood family might have already familiarized himself with the textbook a year in advance with the help of a private tutor, she felt a deep sense of powerlessness. Although she had just suffered a crushing defeat, the law was indeed the only weapon that girls from poor families could rely on. Perhaps Hogwarts is still a lawless place. At least I am absolutely safe with Poison by my side, the girl wrote in a diary titled Living. Chapter 11. You know where you should go. The time on the train passed peacefully. A chubby-looking boy barged in, seemingly looking for his pet, but before he could ask anything, he was scared away by Person's dangerous gaze. The naturally wicked Malfoy was also searching for something, but unfortunately Person wasn't interested in his love story with his future sweetheart Harry, so he simply threw the boy into the next carriage. Two red-haired people were sitting in the next carriage. I'm Malfoy. My dad's on the school board. I'm expelling you. Wait, what's that in your hand? What's that bag, Spider? Let me go. Let me out. Mom, I want to go home. Hogwarts is too scary. A heart-wrenching scream came from next door, and Hermione shuddered as if she were experiencing the same pain herself. Regardless of what happened next door, Hogwarts is indeed a place fraught with danger. All right, Person suddenly closed his book and looked out the window, which had been shrouded in darkness. Judging by the time, The train should be arriving soon. Let's go and keep watch by the door. As soon as the words were spoken, a screeching sound came from outside the train. The scene outside the window gradually froze. A bright, warm yellow lantern stood quietly by the platform. Under the lantern stood a dark figure, burly and large, yet inexplicably reassuring. Hogwarts Station, we've arrived. Following the flow of people, we went through a dense forest and waded across a black lake. A magnificent castle suddenly appeared before everyone's eyes. Hurry up, kids. A tall witch in a long emerald green robe took over from Hagrid and led the trembling new students through the empty hall to a small, empty room. Welcome to Hogwarts. In a few minutes, the sorting ceremony will be held in front of the entire school. I suggest you take some time to tidy yourselves up and look your best while you wait. Professor McGonagall offered a succinct reminder and turned to walk out the door. Before leaving, she couldn't help but glance at Person, who was standing at the far corner of the line, her eyes full of curiosity. Boom! The wooden door closed, leaving only the anxious children inside the room. Next, is it time to be assigned to a different department? What should we do? A thin, small child asked timidly to the people around him. I heard from my father, the girl from the wizarding family stammered, that we might have to face a dragon alone. This can't be. Several gasps of astonishment filled the hut. The Ministry of Magic won't allow it. It's not impossible, Hermione suddenly interjected, her tone heavy. Although there's no explicit law against it, the fact that Hogwarts hosted the Triwizard Tournament in 1637, which resulted in the deaths of 3 heroes and 11 students watching, yet none of them faced criminal charges, is enough to show that Hogwarts enjoys immense legal immunity. Headmaster Dumbledore could easily use dragons in the sorting ceremony without fear of arrest. Finally, the girl declared resolutely, the magical world is indeed a dangerous place. Mommy, I want to go home. I don't want to become dragon dung. Thanks to the elders' tireless concealment and exaggeration, even the young wizards from pureblood families couldn't help but cry out and blow big snot bubbles. Malfoy was so frightened that he turned pale and didn't even bother to seek revenge on Persephone. As for Poison himself, as a transmigrator who had read the original story, he naturally wouldn't believe Hermione's nonsense. At this point, he was more focused on which college he should attend. The friendly Hufflepuff is obviously the best solution. The knowledge-seeking Ravenclaw is also not bad. Gryffindor might receive preferential treatment from Dumbledore, but they might also be involved in the Savior training program, so it's a mixed bag. As for Slytherin, don't be ridiculous. They'd probably be labeled the next Dark Lord by Dumbledore the moment they got in. As Person was pondering Dumbledore's apparent discrimination against the house, the wooden door of the hut was pushed open again, and a figure decisively ran outside. Mr. Malfoy, what are you doing? The sorting ceremony is about to begin. No, you can't do this. My father is a school board member. You can't send me to my death with these lowly people. Once caught, young Malfoy unleashed a flurry of blows on Professor McGonagall's shin, displaying astonishing courage driven by his survival instinct. Faced with this, Professor McGonagall, her face full of black lines, could only wave her wand and wrap Malfoy up like a dumpling before looking sternly at the others. The sorting ceremony is about to begin. Everyone, please stop fooling around and follow me. Upon hearing this, the young wizards, like warriors about to be executed, had tears welling in their eyes. Hermione, meanwhile, once again crept up behind Perseus, muttering to herself, "The less ability one has, the less responsibility one bears. If the sky falls, the tall ones will hold it up. Person, I will always believe in you." Person glanced at Hermione's trembling legs and expressed his skepticism. Led by Professor McGonagall, the young wizards nervously stepped into the great hall. Seeing that there was neither a raging fire dragon curled up in the center of the hall, nor dozens of giant monsters wielding clubs, but only a dirty linen hat placed on a small stool, everyone clearly breathed a sigh of relief. The one that had been huddled at Professor McGonagall's feet finally stopped crawling around and instead half-squatted up, burying its head in its crotch, trying to disguise itself as an ordinary potted plant. He seems to be a little dead. Professor McGonagall glanced at Malfoy, who had lost his chance to choose a spouse for the next 7 years, and pursed her lips, ultimately offering no comment on his unique look. As for the Malfoy children, let Professor Snape worry about them himself. Recalling the Academy Cup, which had changed hands 6 years in a row, and looking at the gloomy Severus Stadium at this moment, Professor McGonagall felt a dark sense of pleasure. You may think I'm not pretty enough, but please don't judge a book by its cover. Suddenly, a jarring and unpleasant song began to play. The Sorting Hat grinned widely and sang loudly, while Professor McGonagall waited quietly until the song ended. Then she slowly took out a piece of parchment and announced in a clear voice, "The sorting ceremony shall now begin." Hannah Abbott, a little wizard with 2 braids, walked up shakily, almost the instant he put on his hat. Hufflepuff. Applause filled the auditorium, and Possum clapped twice as well. After all, this was his future classmate. Well, there's no reason why a friendly, harmless little green dragon like him, who doesn't eat human flesh, shouldn't be assigned to Hufflepuff. Susan Burns, Terry Boot. As more and more people were called out, the applause in the auditorium never stopped. Hermione and a dark-haired man with a lightning bolt scar were sorted into Gryffindor, while a pair of red-haired twins shouted, "We have Potter. We have Potter." Slytherin clearly wanted to reject the transformed Malfoy, but due to his father's position as a school board member, the upperclassmen reluctantly applauded. Finally, Person Savannah. As Professor McGonagall pronounced Person's name, Person felt a gaze suddenly lock onto him. Looking up, Dumbledore sat on the platform, winking playfully and giving an encouraging thumbs up. Professor McGonagall, who was standing nearby, was equally curious, since Hogwarts doesn't often have students joining unexpectedly. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, Poison calmly placed his hat on his head, proactively conveying his thoughts. "Assign me to Hufflepuff. I'm sure you can tell I'm a friendly person, and I'm also a great eater." Sorting Hat. The Sorting Hat. First, I must correct you, Hufflepuff is not the same as being a good-for-nothing. The Sorting Hat. Secondly, child, you know very well where you belong. Chapter 12, The Snake King. Can't you make an exception? Poison struggled to his death, he said. I am a hat with principles. Sorting Hat's tone was firm. So, how about Ravenclaw? I'm a studious person. I've even previewed a whole year's worth of textbooks. Pursuing power is not the same as pursuing knowledge. Okay, Gryffindor is fine, right? I'm actually super brave. My child, as I understand it, hiding in a forest for 11 years because of an imaginary enemy cannot be called brave. What happened to respecting the little wizard's choice? Person couldn't help but complain. He vaguely remembered that Harry was sorted into Gryffindor because he resisted Slytherin. Why can't he? That's theoretically true. The Sorting Hat's voice held a hint of embarrassment. A young wizard's personal opinion is also an important basis for sorting. After all, if a young wizard doesn't agree with the Academy's philosophy, forcing a sort won't yield good results. Then why? But you're just too innocent. You. Before Poison could refute further, the Sorting Hat, as if shoved a hot potato, eagerly announced the destined house. Slytherin. Sparse applause filled the great hall. Most of the Slytherins were scrutinizing the unfamiliar surname, while Malfoy stretched his finger to his neck in a threatening manner, gesturing foolishly. "Don't worry," the Sorting Hat whispered reassuringly. "Headmaster Dumbledore treats all 4 houses equally." "Heh, really?" Poison threw down his Sorting Hat and looked up again. Dumbledore remained as kind and approachable as ever, his smile unchanged. Only those eyes, those deep blue eyes hidden behind the crescent-shaped lenses, flashed a subtle, almost imperceptible scrutiny. Dumbledore, favorability, vigilance +10. The wonderful campus life seems to have almost ended right from the start. Sigh. I guess I'll just have to take it one step at a time. Person sighed and went to the Slytherin table. The atmosphere here is hardly friendly. The upperclassmen made no attempt to hide their disdain, their eyes practically screaming, "You stinking outsider, trying to beg in Slytherin." Malfoy finally stopped his childish, throat-slitting act, and instead tried to exaggerate his experience on the train, attempting to portray Poison as a tyrannical barbarian. It wasn't that no young wizards wanted to talk to Person. It's just that those who could enter Slytherin were either purebloods or shrewd individuals, and no one wanted to risk offending the Malfoy family by befriending a half-blood or even a muggle-born wizard. However, Poison didn't care about this. He was even pleased with this. The more Slytherin ostracized him, the less Dumbledore would see him as the next Voldemort. With that in mind, Person simply went to the corner of the long table and distanced himself from the others. "Why don't you go over there?" A hoarse voice suddenly came from under the table, and a translucent head with empty eyes appeared on the plate. Poison realized that this was not food when he stuck his fork into it. "No need," Person shook his head. Just then, Dumbledore, who had stood up, said, "Idiot. Crybaby. Trash. Twister. Yeah, a bunch of trash. No need for that." The ghost's voice was chilling. He turned his head to look at Malfoy, who was mocking Dumbledore for being crazy, and the little wizards fawning over Malfoy. His expression did not change, but his tone was inexplicably colder. Since that person graduated, Slytherin has become worse with each generation. "That's how inbreeding works," Person nodded in agreement, forking the fried pork chop from the ghost's head and stuffing it into his mouth. "Ahem. So, who exactly are you?" "Barrow, Bloodman Barrow." The ghost emerged from under the plate, revealing the mottled silver bloodstains on his robe and the heavy shackles. "I am the ghost of Slytherin, and one of the first students of this house." "Still a veteran," Person raised an eyebrow. "So, could you please move aside? I really don't want to taste Yorkshire pudding in someone else's shoes." "No, please don't stand here either. Your attire is too shabby. It's affecting my appetite." After hearing this, the blood-soaked Barrow drifted away in silence, his gaunt face growing even more somber. "Is this an attempt to win me over?" Person could sense that this veteran seemed somewhat dissatisfied with the current state of Slytherin, and saw him as a second Voldemort, capable of leading Slytherin to greatness once again. "You have a sharp eye, but I have no intention of supporting this bullshit, pure-blood ideology. They're just a bunch of ignorant mortals. How can they be compared to true pure-blooded dragons?" For Person, causing trouble on Hogwarts campus was hardly a wise move, and Dumbledore would not tolerate the next Dark Lord growing stronger under his nose. Thinking of this, Possum stuffed a few more bites of beef into his mouth, feeling the pure energy nourishing his body, and a smile appeared on his lips. "If I can't cause trouble on campus, I can just go off campus, right? Dumbledore is currently busy playing house with Harry, so he probably won't care what a little dragon that has sneaked into the Forbidden Forest is up to." After finishing off all the food in the surrounding area, Dumbledore stood up and spoke to the drowsy young wizards about the forbidden forest and the dangerous corridor on the right side of the fourth floor. It's hard to say how effective these warnings were. Now, before everyone goes to bed, let's sing the school song together. Dumbledore waved his wand merrily, and amidst the teacher's stiff expressions and the strains of the funeral march, the dinner party came to a perfect end. Slytherin freshmen, keep up. The girl wearing the class monitor's medal was the first to stand up, lightly tapped her wine glass with a silver spoon, and then walked out of the auditorium without looking back. The newcomers looked at each other, but dared not disobey Gemma Farley, who was the prefect, and followed behind like little ducks, with Person, as usual, at the back of the line. I imagine that, as Slytherin students, you must have heard all sorts of rumors about Slytherin. As Gemma spoke, she continued walking, her heavy heels clicking on the steps leading down to the ground. Some say that many dark wizards come from Slytherin. Some say that Slytherin only cares about pure blood. Others say that Slytherin is full of selfish, power-hungry bastards. I do not deny that. Gemma stopped in front of a smooth stone wall without looking back. In fact, she never looked back the entire way, as if she didn't care at all whether anyone had been left behind. "Glory!" she whispered the command, and the stone wall transformed into an archway. Behind the archway was a long and low hut made of rough, large stones. The nearly extinguished fireplace crackled and burned in the corner, and the leaping flames were tinged with an eerie, ghostly green by the deep lake below the window. The lounge furniture was made of dark wood and looked very expensive, but at the moment it was all piled up haphazardly against the wall, like the high-stacked stands of an arena. Senior students filed into the lounge, and no one left. They sat down in twos and threes in the audience seats, making room for a stage in the narrow lounge. "Come in, little snakes." Once everyone was in place, Gemma finally led the freshmen into the lounge, to the center, to be scrutinized by all the senior students. Whether you are power-hungry madmen, ambitious fanatics, or staunch advocates of pure-blood principles, Slytherin accepts you all. There is only one kind of person who has no place in Slytherin. Come on, pull out your wands, and prove you're not trash. Prove you have the power to trample others underfoot. Each new student class will have a champion selected. The strongest among you will be chosen. The choice is made, the Snake King. Chapter 13, The Gamble. The Snake King. Poison wasn't interested in this rather childish title, but the others clearly didn't think so. Malfoy had already begun to gather his supporters, while Crabbe and Goyle stood like two mountains, intimidating the other restless young wizards. However, Theodore, also a pure-blooded member of the 28 Saints, seemed unwilling to relinquish the leadership and quietly drew his wand. "Just wait to die." Malfoy mouthed threats to Person, clearly blaming him for everything that had happened today. The attack on the bag spider on the train, the humiliation at the sorting ceremony, and all the misfortunes he had suffered. Gemma watched this scene without stopping it. In fact, a slight smile appeared on her lips. "This is your battlefield," she continued, explaining the rules of the duel. "Slytherin doesn't care about methods, nor are they bound by any rules. You can form alliances with others, or stab your teammates in the back. You can skillfully guide enemies to attack each other, or you can suppress everyone with absolute strength. Everything you possess will be an asset in this battle, whether it's your illustrious family background," Gemma looked at Malfoy and Theodore, "or your exceptional eloquence." Blaise, on the other side, was trying to persuade several half-blood wizards to join forces against the enemy. "There are no rules here. It's absolutely fair here. All you have to do is defeat everyone else and be the last one standing. Standing until the very end." Poison had already begun to think about how to play dead. Without a doubt, the so-called Snake King was nothing but harm to him, like a red name highlighted in red and enlarged in a game. Even Person himself didn't believe that Dumbledore would let him off easily. Slytherin was like a corpse floating on a river, seemingly huge and ferocious, but in reality it was already rotten and decaying. The power it once contained was slowly falling away as its muscles were soaked in the river water, revealing its bones riddled with worms. The empire built on pure blood is on the verge of collapse, and then the new leader, Voldemort, steps on the gas. Slytherin remains illustrious today. Prefect Gemma doesn't forget to introduce the new students to the 6 consecutive House Cup champions, the famous seniors in Slytherin's history, and that Merlin was once a part of Slytherin, even though Merlin lived 500 years before Hogwarts. The reality is that Slytherin has been ostracized by the other 3 houses, and even Ravenclaw, who was once the most friendly, now wishes Slytherin would lose the House Cup. Person thought with a hint of malice that all of this might be a conspiracy by Dumbledore, allowing Snape to favor Slytherin, thus uniting the other 3 houses against a common enemy and weakening the power of the pure-blood families represented by Voldemort. Regardless of the truth, just play dead. As she pondered this, Gemma uttered her final reminder, or perhaps warning. Slytherin is not like Gryffindor, where pointless bravery is not valued. So, if you feel you're not good enough and want to give up, you can just say so, and I'll let you go back to your dorm and get a good night's sleep. However, think it through. The price of showing weakness is far heavier than you imagine. After speaking, Gemma took a step back, leaving the stage to the eager freshmen, while the other senior students looked down at these beansprouts who couldn't even wave their wands properly, with an air of superiority. Who do you think will win? In a corner of the lounge, several burly men gathered together, occupying the most spacious sofa. Those around them looked at them with fear. As the Quidditch team that brought glory to Slytherin, these men were clearly of high status. Is there even a need to think about it? Slytherin batter Lucian leaned lazily against the sofa and casually pointed. Look at the eldest son of the Malfoy family. Look at how many people are gathered around him. Quite a few Slytherins depend on the Malfoys for their livelihood. Theodore's not bad either, said another batter, Perikin. I heard his father taught him a lot, much better than Malfoy, that good-for-nothing who got dragged out of the box. You have no idea how loudly the Weasley brothers laughed at the dinner party. He was dragged out, Captain Marcus asked, intrigued. Who did it? Even if the Weasley brothers are scoundrels, they wouldn't lay a hand on a freshman, would they? It wasn't them. Peregrine waved his hand, pointing to Poison standing in the corner. Were you all too busy eating at the dinner party? The youngest son of the Malfoys was cursing that kid the whole time. It was driving me crazy. Is that so? Lucian sat up straight. Person Savonrick. A strange surname. To dare lay a hand on the eldest son of the Malfoy family, he must either be one of the 28 purebloods, or he can only be a muggle-born mudblood. Which one do you think he is? As he spoke, Lucian couldn't help but laugh. Let's bet something new this year. I bet this kid will get a good beating from Malfoy. What about you guys? I still favor Theodore, Peregrine shrugged. Why can't it be Person beating Malfoy again? Marcus said, with a wicked grin, but he didn't throw galleons on the table, clearly not intending to participate in the betting. Terence, how do you bet? Lucian suddenly turned his head and looked at the seeker in the team, who was also the only player on the Slytherin team who wasn't that burly. Ah, me, Terence put down his book and said somewhat timidly, I'll bet he'll just give up. There's no chance of winning anyway. Ha, you think everyone's like you. Lucian made no attempt to hide the sarcasm in his tone. The first guy in all these years to give up before even fighting. Maybe Muggle bloodlines are just birds of a feather. Looks like you, as a half-blood, understand mudbloods better than I do. No, I just Terence wanted to explain himself, but Poison suddenly stepped forward and in front of everyone said calmly, "I give up." Boom! The gallon on the table bounced up from the shock, startling Terence. Marcus glanced at Lucian's grim face and, not wanting to miss a good show, fanned the flames, saying, "All right, looks like Terence is the winner tonight." Lucian, losing to a half-blood, you're really getting worse and worse. So, are you going to accept the loss? No, we're just having fun. There's no such thing as winning or losing. Terence hurriedly denied it, but Lucian just silently put the gallon on the